Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's webinar. This week we're going to be talking about terrains and more specifically how to handle the multiple displays for a terrain in our terrain files. The question has come in. Basically, there is a 2D file out there, the GCTRRD file, that is specifically for our contours. In the old way, we would display the contours using the old DTM tools, and we could deliver those contours to whoever's doing the drainage work, and we were asked, how do we want to handle that delivery or that creation of that file with the new terrain file, with the new terrain elements. The terrain element, it's a new element introduced in Select Series 3, and it is a single element within Microstation. So we no longer have, a zillion individual elements of all of our triangles or contours or whatever it is that we want to display. We now have one element. It's a lot faster to process, so we can instantly go from viewing our contours to viewing our triangles or just the boundary just by a few clicks. So we've taken a look at it, and we have a basic workflow that I'm going to show you this morning, and I'm going to show you how to get to all the different settings in order to update, change the display of our terrain models or our terrain elements. So first thing that we need to do is we need to create a DTM file. In that DTM file, in a default model, we're going to import the terrain from our tin. There's other options as well. Within that DTM file, we're also going to create some new models. These new models are only needed if you need to deliver, say, your contours or the triangles or any other displayed view of your terrain to someone else. Not everyone is going to understand how the new features work. We understand that, and that's why we're introducing these new models so that it's something easy that someone else who may not be as up to speed can simply just reference that model in and they're good to go. Once we create these new models, of course, we need to set up our models so that they display what we want them to display. Then you need to take those contours or triangles or whatever it may be, reference them to other files. Maybe it's a proposed drainage design file, and they want to see those contours. So we're going to look at all of the steps and what options do I have and what we are going to recommend. There's no right and wrong, I don't think, but what our office is recommending for getting all of this set up and what we hope is the most efficient workflow. So the first thing we need to do is create the DTM file. The DTM file, you can create that under the Create File Project tool. This works inside and outside of Microstation. We're using the roadway control file and then setting up the file group to roadway design files. We have a digital terrain model, 10 model for 3D. This creates the GDTM-RD file. This is for our existing terrain. So I'm going to tell it, once you select it, tell it to create, and then you can open the file. And I'm going to go through a few of these slides, and then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to show you how all this works. Once I've created this file, I'm going to go into the default model. In that default model is where I'm going to import my terrain. Most commonly used is we have a 10 file, so we're going to go out there, we're going to tell it the very first icon here to create from file, and that allows us to go out and select our 10 file and bring it in. So when I click on this icon under my Civil Tools, Terrain Models, I come in here and it'll give me this import terrain model dialog. The things that I want to make sure that I get set right is the source file units. They need to be set to US survey feet. And then the feature definition. We have a feature definition out there called DTM existing, and that's going to set all of the level symbology that I need for all of my different displays that I'm going to need for my terrain, my contours, my triangles, flow lines, boundary, all of that. It's set within this feature definition. And then when I select that feature, it's going to set the import options, import terrain only, leave that as set, and then click import. Like I said earlier, there are some other options for creating and importing, just like we had available in the old DTM tools. I can bring in it, my terrain in from an ASCII file. There's a graphical filter. We can pull it in from a point cloud or from elements. And just some things, and I'll show this to you too live, but with Project Explorer, which if you're in SS3 or the SS4 workspace, you can get Project Explorer with that. As long as you don't change the function keys, you can hit F11 and this will bring your Project Explorer up. The only place once I import my data, and I think this is something that it's important for you to understand, is that when I bring that data in, if I go into my civil model within Project Explorer, you'll see that I have a terrain model and it tells me where that source came from. And so I brought that in from a file. And if I right click, I have the option to update that terrain model from source. So if I go in and I use, however I may do it, using the new survey tools, or if I use the old ones, I'm assuming we want to recommend the new ones, but if I update and change, something happens to my 10 file, then all I need to do is come in here in the default model where I have imported it. I have the option to update the terrain model. You'll also see in the civil standards where if I navigate down, I have the terrain display and I have the DTM existing. This is only if I want to go look at these definitions, or if I want to update the terrain. The only model that's going to show up in is the one that I import that data into. So I would need to go back to this model. No matter how many models you may create within your file, I'm still going to need to come back to this one in order to update it from the source. Go ahead and cover this one too. So right now you guys don't have this ability. But in SS4, we've got it set up so that whenever you create your DTM file, it's going to create for you both a contours and a triangles model in 2D. Your default model will be 3D, and then the other two will be 2D, so that you can do what you need to within those models. Are they required? No, they're there if you need them. We're going to use those 2D models to reference specific displays to other files. And let me go ahead and get that set up. So I already have Microstation open. I'm going to flip over to Microstation. And I'm going to go to Actions and Create File Project. Make sure you set your active project. It'll automatically, I'm doing this in SS4, but it'll bring it up to whatever workspace you're in. This will work in 3 or 4. Setting up the control file needs to be the roadway. Change it from the default, which will be the top one, construction, down to roadway design files. And you'll see the digital terrain model /10 model in 3D. I already have one out there, so it's going to create the O2 and it's going to put it in my roadway directory. I'll tell it to create. Okay, so it created it for me, and now I'm going to tell it to open file. When I open file, this is when it's going to create those models for me. And this will be available in our release of SS4 coming in July. It takes it a second. And I'll tell it okay. The last model created was triangles, so that's the one we're in. So I need to switch it to my default view, or my default model. And then I need to switch over to my civil tools so I can get down to my terrain model tools. On this very top one up here in the corner is Create from File. When I click on that, it will open up and ask me to look for the 10 file, which is in my survey directory. So I'll grab the survey and I'll grab my 10 file. All right. So once that's done, then I get this dialog. I want to make sure that I set my source to the units to the US survey feet, and then I need to set a feature definition. All right, and this very small little portion of a dialogue here, but you want to go to the terrain displays and then go down to DTM existing and then tell it to import. Takes it just a second. Close that and then fit view. And you can see the default is just the boundary. Okay, and I'm going to leave that just like it is. All right. And then I'm going to go over to my contours view. Once I have this in, I also wanted you guys to understand this too, is that the data that I imported, you can see I do have, in my model, I have a terrain model. Okay, so that is in there. If I go into and create into models and I go and I create a new, or more specifically, I want to show you where if I take this model that has something in it and I copy this, okay, and I tell it, we're just going to call it ECSO, and it's a test. I'll tell it okay. Note that when I fit view, there's nothing here, okay, and that's normal, and that's what you're going to get. All right, that's just something that I wanted you to understand, so that you can't, so that you know you can't just take this default model and just copy it. The reason is that in this model I've actually imported that data in, and it's just viewing that data. This model, even though I copied it, it doesn't see it as having that data imported into it, if that makes sense. I wanted to bring that up because that is something in my testing that I discovered, and I didn't want it to throw you guys if that's something that you tried to do and said, well, where did it go? So once I have my models created, how do I change the display? What do I need to do? If I use the element information tool or the selection tool, and I select the boundary of my terrain, I can then open up element information, and that's going to give me the information about my terrain. This is where you can change the way it looks. First thing that I want to do is I want to reference in my contours or triangles, I want to reference my default model to the other model that I'm in. So in this example, I'm showing you the contours. Then I select the boundary element, then select element information so I can get the properties of that terrain model. Then I want to make sure to go down to the calculated features and turn on what I want to see. By default, under source features display, you notice I have boundary and spot. The spots are off, but my boundary is on. So if I wanted to turn that boundary off, I would have to either double click in this field, or there is a drop down that says on and off. And that's the way all of these will work. So I turn on my contours, but something important to remember is that I need to turn on the override symbology. If I don't turn this on, don't ask me why it works this way. I haven't gotten my head wrapped around it exactly. But even though it's in a reference, if I do not turn this on and I start changing the display, then it changes the display in my default model as well. Okay, so it's important that I turn this override symbology on. While I'm in the same design file as where I imported it, then I will be able to use the existing features that have already been set up. Remember, I set it up to DTM existing for the feature. So if I change between, with this turned on, if I change these things on, it will still use the correct symbology and view the way it is supposed to. Okay, it's a little different when we talk about referencing this model to another file. If I expand at the top of the element information dialog, if I expand the terrain model, it will open up and it'll give me the calculated features and the source features. I then can open these further. Under the contours, this is where I can change my major and minor intervals. So if I wanted to see this, major intervals every 20 feet and minor every 5 or 10, I can change that here. If I go a little bit further and hit the major or minor contours, then it opens up these settings where I can set the levels, whether they're on or off. I can go in, this is the major, so the major contours has our text labels. So under here I can change the text style. I can change how the interval, I can change the interval of how often I see my text. By default it's going to be set to 30, but I can change that here. If I want to see it every 50, every 100, however I want to see those labels, I can change that in the contour labels section. The label precision is under the contours, I guess at the top of that, not at the major or minor level, but up at the top at contours you can change the precision for the label. By default it's set to 0, so you'll get even elevations. Something else that I want to point out is that the text size that I see, when you first change it to contours, if your drawing scale, which by default it is, set to 1:1, then you're going to see no text. I mean, you'd have to zoom way in order to see this text because it's tiny. I can control the text size by changing the text style. By default it's set to small. If I change it, which is 0.07, if I change it to medium or large, then my text size will get bigger, and it multiplies it times my drawing scale. So I can go in and change that using the drawing scale options. All right, that's as far as I wanted to go with that one. And let me go ahead and go into Microstation and show you this part where I go ahead and I've got my master model where I have imported my terrain. And now I'm going to go in and set up my contours model. First thing that, which is the one that's open, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to open up my references. The first thing that I want to do is go ahead and reference, it's the same file, but I need the other model in here. So I'm going to grab the GTTMRDO2 file, tell it to open, and I need the default model, and I'm going to tell it OK. Okay. At this point, could I come in here and merge this model into master? Yes, I could. One word of caution, if that's something you decide to do, it's not going to be something that I'm going to recommend to you this morning. If I do that, if I have updated the terrain, well, if I merge this into master, then I lose that link to the default model, and any changes there are not going to show up here. Okay, I would have to either go through that process again, or the other option would be to import it into every one of these models, and I don't think that's an option either, because it creates more work. Import it into your default model, and then let's reference it into these other models that you may need. Okay. I just wanted to point those things out. So now that I've referenced it, what I want to do is I want to use element information or element selection, select the boundary, and then select element information so that I can get my element information dialog up and take a look at the settings. As you can see, by default, this is referenced in. This is all grayed out. I can't change anything in here. I can turn things on and off, but let's say I turn my contours on and I double clicked there to get it to come on. If I go to my default view, notice I have contours showing up in here now. That's not good. So to avoid that, I'm going to select this, and at the bottom, okay, I just love it when Murphy decides to join a webinar with me. There it is. Under reference right here, you see the override symbology. I want to turn this on. Okay. By doing so, I'm overriding the symbology in this model, but I'm not changing the symbology that I would see from the other model, the default model, okay? Then I want to turn on the contours, okay? And then if I go to the top under selection and I open up the terrain model, open up contours, I can change this to say maybe I want 10. When you hit enter, it dumps you out of there. Maybe I want to set this to 10 and 5 instead, just as an example. Okay, you can see my display has changed. Okay, and I think most likely that's going to be the biggest thing that you're going to need to change. The other thing, if like, see how I don't see any text going on in here. I would have to get lucky and go exactly where some text may be to actually find it right now. All right. If I turn on, if I go onto, it's under settings, drawing scale. If I open up my drawing scale, by default it's set to 1:1 when I created the file. If I change that to 1:50, boom. I now have my text showing up. Okay. I can change that as well. If I go into the contour labels, right now it's set to small. I can change that to medium and see it just got bigger. I can also go in and maybe change it to large. All right. I can also go in and change this, and I don't know why it bounces down to 29 feet, but it does. I can change this. Let's say I don't want to see them every 30 feet. Maybe I want to see them every 100 or 50 feet. Okay. And then that just changed the interval or the spacing in between my labels. Okay. And as close as that may be, I could even change this to every 100 feet. So hopefully all of that made sense. I'm going to take this back and change this to every 5. Even if you tab, it takes you back out of here. It drives me crazy. And 1. Okay. All right, so now I have my contours model set up, and out of habit I usually save settings. Now I'm going to go to my triangles very quickly. There's not as much involved in triangles. Basically it's the same process. I come in here, I reference, so I need to attach my default model. So I'm going to take that same file, use the default model, bring it in, fit view, so I can see it. I'm going to select my boundary. I'm going to turn on my override, and then I'm going to turn on my triangles. If I go up here underneath the features, there's not, I mean I could change the level, but I don't think you need to do that. You could if you wanted. But at this point I've got triangles. That's pretty much all I need. Here's something else. Where did it go? If you wanted to view your triangles, by default it uses slivers. Okay. You can come in here and change this instead to use a max triangle length. Notice how whenever I change that option, I'm seeing extra triangles in here than I did before. So it will recalculate even the display. Let's take that in half and say, what do I get every 500 feet? Notice right in here, see how that changed? What if I made this 100 feet? Okay. so that you can change the view. All the information is still there. It's not like we had to do when we created our tins in the old way, where we had to, I mean, what we got is what we got when we displayed it. Now we have the ability to make changes on the fly. All the data is a part of this one element, and it can go in and recalculate this edge method. It'll recalculate it on the fly and then show you the alternate display of what you've asked it to do. Okay, so just making you aware that that is also available. It is it's part of the main, if I go up to selection, it's part of the main settings options as well, along with, you know, displaying it as triangles. I can show it, I can turn on the flow arrows, and you'll notice each shape, they're kind of small. If I change the drawing scale, that had no, I don't think that had any effect. But as you can see, I have flow arrows on each one so that I can then see where is the water flowing. Let me grab the terrain model again, turn it off. So that's in essence how I would go in and I could show the display of what I needed. Okay. And like I said, as long as I'm within the same file that I imported that data into, then when I change my features or my display, it's using those features and it's showing it using the correct symbology. But it is simply a display. Okay. All right. So I've set this up. I now have my default model with the boundary. I have and the data where it's imported. I have a contours model where I am showing contours, okay, with the labels. And then I also have a triangles model that can be used to reference my triangles if somebody needed to see the triangles and didn't want to go into all of the options of setting up the settings, or maybe you're sending it to someone who's got all the design knowledge but maybe doesn't have the Microstation knowledge. Okay, it's a very easy way for them to import, just referencing the information that they need. Okay, that being said, the next step, okay, is referencing. I've created this information for someone else to use. What do we need to do if, you know, what happens next? So that file with those models can be used to reference to another Microstation file, and I can view that information. One of the things that I thought about was, I don't know how many times in the past, you know, I've had to go in and make changes to my settings whenever I'm, you know, go into the display of, you know, the old tools, the one with the little glasses. To load the DTM features. I would have to go in there like, no, show it to me, you know, and they'd give me a different interval for the major and minors. The contours, I was, you know, constantly having to go in and change that. It was very simple the other way, because I could go in and just show it however I wanted it to, place a fence, you know, just as a display, place a fence, and then print it and give it to my engineer. Not quite as easy this time around, especially if I go in and I reference that contour model. So once I've done that, it will show up the way that I have it set in my reference file. However, what if I need to change that? Changing it is a little bit different when it's attached to a reference file, because I don't have that DTM existing feature available for use, okay, in my new file, whichever one I've referenced it to. So I have to do things a little bit differently. All right. I need to make sure that, again, I turn on the override symbology. If I turn on and I don't use, if I use the same method, at that point before I was telling you, okay, now just go in and tell it what you want to have on. If I do that, like say I've turned on the triangles. Triangles are supposed to be green. Okay, what I get is it goes onto the default level, so everything turns white because it doesn't have that feature, doesn't know what it's supposed to do. Okay, so it just uses the default levels. So instead of, I'm still going to need to turn the features on, but instead of controlling it through the features, I need to go up to the template option under General and select a element template. Currently what you guys have are all triangles. There's proposed, there's one I think existing that just shows the boundary. There's another existing that will show the existing triangles. But then you also have where it will display using some proposed. So I can get blue ones, I can get yellow ones, I can get it's like an orangey brown color. So they have for the mesh and the proposed, I can grab any one of those and I will get triangles. In SS4, there will be 2 more available for you to use for your contours. And then if you need to, and that's on the next slide, I'll show it to you in a second, if you need to, you can go into the element templates and create a template that you would need to set up the information. The other main thing that whenever to note here is whenever you are referencing say the contours model to another file, when you reference it in, you need to make sure you turn on live nesting, because the view or the contours that I have showing in that file are in reference. Okay, so I'm referencing a referenced model. Okay, if that makes sense, it should. So I need to make sure that I turn on live nesting and it only needs to have a depth of 1. That way I get that terrain model to show up. Okay, and like I said, if I don't have the display setting like I need it to be within the element, what's available in the element templates, you guys can create an element template in the active model. Okay, when I look in here under element templates, you'll notice that I have a file name and then all of this is blue. That means that this information is in my current file. If there's nothing here, then you may have to copy it from the DGN lab. The DGN lab exists outside of my file. Another thing to note is that once I create it, I'm creating it in the active file. That means that I don't have it for another file. If I go into another file and reference it and I need to show it the same way, I'll have to go through this process with element templates and create that element template in the new file. Okay. I'm going to go back over to Microstation. Just like I did a few minutes ago, what you saw, I'm going to go into the QTDSRD file. Let's grab that one. So I have in this model my alignment, my design, and my topo, things that I needed in order to do quantities. All right. I'm going to use this as an example. So let's go ahead and let's see what would I need to do if I wanted to show my contours in here. Okay, I would grab that reference to that O2 file, and instead of default, I want to grab the contours model, and I'm going to tell it OK. And notice I have nothing here. I need to make sure that I turn on live nesting and it's set to a nesting depth of 1. Okay, and notice now I have my contours. I'm going to close this. If I come in here, and so you've sent this, and basically you have to make sure that whoever you send the file to, make sure they know they need to grab what the correct model is. Okay, so they need to make sure they grab the contours model, not the default. All right, then if it's what it needs to be, they don't need to make any changes. Come in here and they have the information that they need. Okay, what if you need it to be something else? Okay, I'm going to select my referenced terrain model, and notice all of this is grayed out. I can't turn things on and off. I can't do anything. All right, in order to turn that on, I need to turn the override symbology on. Okay, notice that even though I turn this on, my template is still grayed out. Click somewhere in the file and notice that now that I turn the override on, notice this is all not on the right levels. This is default. It's white. It's not what I want. Okay, all my colors are off. Okay, select it again, and then my template comes up available for me. I want to go down to terrain models, and you'll notice in here that I can change it so that I'm viewing it differently. The existing, like I said, that's showing just the boundary, or I can see the proposed, which is set up for blue triangles. You guys can play with this whenever you get there. But what I've done is I've created, and you will get these two whenever you get SS4, but I've created an element template in here for contours at 5 and 1. Okay, so, and that's basically what I had it at, or I can change it instead to use the 10 and 5. Okay, so now you see I'm not seeing as many contours. I can then come up and make changes up here. Actually, can I? No. I'm pretty sure you can't. It needs to be controlled through the element template. No, I can control it from here. But to get the right level symbology, you do need to set the correct template. Okay, and those templates, like I said, they will set, you can set them up to default to whatever it is that you need. Okay, so how exactly do I do that? I would go to element templates, and then open up the current file. All right, I can see under here under terrain models, once I've used it, notice I switched it from existing to proposed to the two contours. Once I've used it, it will show up under the active file. Okay, if I haven't, then I would need to go down here under the FDOT element templates, grab one of these, and right click and copy it, and then select the terrain model. But I already have one, so let's grab this 5 and 1. I'm going to copy this. If I right click over here, notice I can't paste it. Okay, I have to select the category or the folder icon, and from here I can paste it. Okay, give it a new name and say maybe this one I want it every 20 feet and I'm gonna see the minors every 10. Okay, probably not a common one to use. All right, so once I've done that, then I can come over here, tab, quit. There. I can come in here under the calculated features. I can tell this one, what do I want to see? Do I want to see the contours as well as flow arrows? I can turn that on. And then under the calculated feature settings, then I can come in here under the contours, and I can tell it in here what I want my major and minor intervals to be. Okay. Then I can come under the major contours, and this is where my text is set. It's set to small. Maybe that's too small, and I don't want it to be set there. So maybe I want it to be large so that it's easy to read. Okay, so I can set that here. I can also set a different interval. I want it every, maybe I want it every 200 feet. All right, depends on the scale of what I'm looking at. Probably wouldn't want to change anything on the minor because we don't show text on the minor, but maybe I want to turn that on for some reason. I can do that. All right, and then let me see. Under flow arrows, there's how you change the size. Under the flow arrows, I can tell it, okay, I want to take that right now. It comes in teeny tiny at a scale of 1. Maybe I want it to come in at a scale of 20, just to make it something bigger, to make it so I can see it. All right. Once I've done that, it's written to this file. All right. Close out element templates. Go back to element information. And then selecting the terrain model or selection, either one, I get the template, and now I can go in and see the 2010 template. Yep, my arrows are a little too big. But notice, I do get arrows. Okay, so all those triangles now have where their arrows are at, so I now have arrows. And then I also have, you can see where I've got, you know, I made this interval really big. So there is the major, and I don't even see a minor, which is not surprising because it's pretty flat. Okay, with the interval that I gave it. All right. I can come down here under the, and come here and change this, make that every 1 foot. If that's something that you realize, okay, that you need. The template just sets you the basic symbology and settings that you need, and then from there you can change it as you need to. Okay, that all being said, let's kind of recap. When we're talking about our terrains and we are talking about how do we want to look at our workflow as far as delivery, we really only need the GDTMRD file, the GCTRD, that is the name of the file for the 2D contours. You do not need to use that file anymore. Okay, eventually we will retire it and it will go away because because of the new features that we are and capabilities of the new element type, it kind of makes that obsolete. Okay, so what we want to deliver instead is the GDTMRD file with these other models that are set up in it. It will make it easier using the reference workflow. If I need to update the 10 file in order to get all of my views to be correct, then I update it in the default model, and then it's referenced everywhere else, and it will show up everywhere else. Just like I would if I was delivering the other 2D file, I would have to, once I updated it, send them an updated file. But then you're only dealing with one file, one model, update, send it back out. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'm sure there's probably some questions, and as you use this, I will sure you wind up with more questions as you go. And of course, if you do, give us a call. You guys have made life easy for me today. I only have one question that even when it actually wasn't even a question, it came out as more of a helpful statement. Think of the override as a display lock. And yes, that is quite right. Well, it depends on where you're looking at it. It locks it down if it's referenced to another file. Then it does. It locks everything down. I'm only displaying whatever I referenced in, and I have to turn that on. If I go into the same model, I have to turn it on, and at that point the lock kind of has a different option in that I can change anything that I want to, and I need to turn that on so that I'm not sharing that changed option everywhere else in the file where it may be used. Another question, are these control features only available in SS4? No. They are currently available in Slick Series 3. Right now, you guys can, you'd have to make the models for the contours and the triangles. I recommend for model names, keep it simple. Contours, triangles. The element templates, as I showed you, it's pretty easy to create those if you have questions or need help. We are available and can help you, but you can create those element templates in Slick Series 3 and do exactly like I just did and change the settings as you need to. And hopefully what I've shown you has given you a better idea of how to use the terrain model tools and the settings. If you have any questions at all, please let us know. I've got contact information. There's my phone number and email address. You can also send in an email to the ECSO.support email address, and that goes to just about all of us in support, out to our website, and of course there's always our CADD support forum out there on the Bentley community site. I'll give this a couple more minutes for any more questions. And if I don't have any, you guys, I just want to say thank you for joining the webinar this morning. I hope it was beneficial. Have a wonderful day and the rest of your week, and we will see you again next week.